There are some people that say violence never solves anything, and they've never looked at how the end of Reconstruction occurs. During Reconstruction, there was a large anti-African American faction that formed of white supremacists. These white supremacists are often categorized and clumped together by the term the Ku Klux Klan, although there was other white supremacist organizations at the time. There's the Klan, there's the White League, there are the Red Shirts in South Carolina. These anti-Republican, anti-African American factions used violence to intimidate black voters and Republican voters in general. So they are intentionally using violence to change political policy. African Americans could vote really only with the protection of the federal troops, and as time went on, the federal troops even weren't enough to protect African Americans and Republicans from these violent attacks. Sometimes it was economic and physical intimidation, but more often than not, we would wrap all of this into the term lynching. Lynching doesn't necessarily mean hanging somebody. It could also mean beating them to death, setting them on fire. During the mid to late part of Reconstruction, we can see that there's a spike in lynchings. And then after Reconstruction ends, lynchings go down. And then they come back later during the Jim Crow era as another form to violently intimidate African Americans and other people that were deemed not worthy. Often, this is a white supremacist tactic to deny people the right to vote. As the violence went up and as white voters were pardoned or leaders were welcomed back in, we see the term redemption or redeemed governments take over. What this means isn't that the governments are redeemed. What it means is that African Americans lost their right to vote. And it means that a white supremacist government was established. Even if the people that voted weren't necessarily white supremacists, it was establishing the power of the white population of the era. So Republican office holders are gradually replaced. These southern groups are redeeming the governments, meaning that these white Democrats are taking over. And yes, the Democratic Party and the KKK were the power of white supremacy at the time, but please remember that political parties change their platforms over time. This becomes known as the Solid South all the way up into the Civil Rights era. Just keep that in mind.